Dear friends, it's always a joy to be with you, sharing ideas on the cutting edge of science and everything else that's important, including the future of well-being and technology and whatever else that makes a difference in the world. So today I have a very special guest, Marion Nestle, and our friend Rajnish Khanna, whom you know from before. He's part of our advisory group for both nutritional psychiatry and resurrecting the planetary microbiome. I'll ask Rajnish to please introduce Marion, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Deepak. It's a great pleasure for me to be in company with both of you. And Marion, it's a pleasure to introduce you. You don't need introduction, but Marion is Paulette Goddard Professor Emerita of Nutrition, Food Studies, and Public Health at New York University. She's written 6 books. I would say I read Food Politics with great interest. It's one of the leading publications dealing with the politics of food. Her ideas are very clearly presented, and I've always appreciated the clear vision that she provides in understanding the food systems in general. She wrote a recent book, Unsavory Truth, how food companies skew the science of what we eat. And then the most recent book, which is Let's Ask Marion, which I have right here. And I think we will talk about this today. So with that, back to you, Deepak.
Okay. Marion, first of all, again, a great privilege to have you here so we can inform public and people about what's really going on, and the benefits of your knowledge are going to be very valuable. So before we start officially on Let's Ask Marion and other things, can we share a little bit? Can you share a little bit about your life, where you grew up, where you went to school, how you came to be doing what you are doing today? You look wonderful, by the way. I want to be just like you when I grow up.
Thank you. When everyone asks me, how do you do it? I say, well, it's the benefits of good nutrition, of course.
There you
So I grew up mostly in California. So my family moved to California from New York when I was 12 years old, and they moved to Los Angeles, and I went to Berkeley to go to college, which I loved very, very much, and then did undergraduate work at Berkeley, worked for a while, then did a doctorate in molecular biology. Moved from there to Boston, where I had my first teaching job, and I was given a nutrition course to teach. I had been teaching cell and molecular biology, which was very abstract, and the department asked me to teach a course on nutrition. It was like falling in love. All of a sudden, I could understand the relationship between biology and something very practical, the food that you put in your mouth. I thought this would be a fabulous way to teach undergraduate biology because it wasn't abstract. It was something that was very concrete, and students could use food to learn about what's the composition of things in life, the composition of animals and plants, what happens to food in the body, so they could learn about digestion, absorption, and metabolism. Plus, it was related to everything that was going on in society. When I first started teaching nutrition in the mid-1970s, Linus Pauling had just written Vitamin C in the Common Cold. Francis Moore Lappé had just written Diet for a Small Planet. And Center for Science and the Public Interest had just published a book called Food for People, Not for Profit, that could have been written yesterday because the issues are so current. So I used those books as texts in the first course I taught, and we were off and running, and I've never looked back. I have been teaching that ever since. I got more and more interested in the politics of food quite a bit later. I left Boston and went back to San Francisco and ran a nutrition program at UCSF for about 10 years. And then went to Washington and worked for the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion on the Surgeon General's report on nutrition and health. And then I went to NYU in 1988, and I've been there ever since. I'm retired, but as I like to say, this is what retirement looks like.
Are you in New York right now? Do you live
I'm in New York right now. I just finished teaching a class this semester. So I'm still teaching, I'm still writing. I've got a book in the works.
Are you teaching at NYU still?
Yes, I am. I taught a course on food systems.
My apartment is in the NYU area.
I'm speaking now for an apartment in a building that's owned by NYU.
So I'm walking distance from where you are right now.
Oh, is that right?
That's very interesting.
I'm on Washington Place in an NYU.
I'm on Broadway and 11th, very close.
For heaven's sakes. All right.
And actually university. So university is right there.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Anyway, listen, this is amazing. We'll get into the politics later, but in the Eastern wisdom traditions, the physical body is referred to the food body, and also the energy body. So food, energy, and the body, physical body, go together. But again, in the Eastern wisdom traditions, Ayurveda, we have a mental body too, a mind and intellect and ego. And then we have a body prior to that, which is the spiritual body, but we don't have to talk about that right now. But right now, what our main interests recently has been, thanks to a lot of very interesting collaborations and also insights from Rajnish, we are trying to create something called the International Academy of Nutritional Psychiatry. So can you say anything about the relationship to food to energy and mood and emotions?
I certainly can. Food is one of life's greatest pleasures. And there's a reason for that. And the reason that food is so pleasurable is because we have to have it to live. So that we have an innate love of food. We have hunger, which is a very unpleasant sensation if we don't have enough food. Our entire body is set up to make sure that we have food because food provides us with nutrients and it provides us with sources of energy, protein, fats, and carbohydrates that are sources of energy in the body. And if we don't have enough of those things, or, as is much more common in the United States these days, we have too much of those things, we don't feel well. We become ill. And the COVID pandemic has shown in a way, I think, that is more visible than has ever been visible to Americans before, how important food is for health and welfare. The pandemic has been such a mental strain on absolutely everyone. It's been so difficult to deal with. And some people have compensated for that by eating a lot of junk food. Not a good idea. And they quickly find out that it doesn't make them feel better. It doesn't help them with the kind of resiliency that they need to get through a difficult, emotionally trying time like this that just seems to be going on and on for forever, even though it's getting better now. So I think that food and mood and food and mental health, food and physical health are inextricably linked. And that people who eat a healthy diet, and I'm all for eating a healthy diet, do better than people who are not eating a healthy diet. It's pretty simple, except that there are enormous forces in society that encourage people not to eat a healthy diet because unhealthy diets are so much more profitable than healthy ones.
So from everything I've been told, food that is refined, manufactured, processed, comes from a factory, has chemicals in it, steroids and antibiotics and hormones and inflammatory products, that food can immediately cause dysbiosis in our microbiome, which is most of our genetic information in the body, can cause inflammation. And we're seeing that inflammation, anxiety, depression are also going to go together and precede morbidity and mortality from almost every illness. And you're saying that the COVID-19 pandemic is hurting those who are on junk food more than anybody else.
Yes, the big risk factors for bad outcome of COVID-19 are, first of all, age, advanced age. You can't do anything about that one.
You are doing it and I'm doing it. We're doing it, right?
Well, you do the best you can with it, but you can't really change it. But you certainly can change your risk factors for type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease, which are factors that are very strongly associated with poor outcome from COVID-19. And that's where healthy diets and being physically active and not smoking and not drinking too much come in, all those lifestyle factors.
So what, in your opinion, is the ideal diet?
Well, I think a healthy diet is so easy to explain. It's so easy to explain that the journalist Michael Pollan can do it in 7 words. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. That's really all there is to it. And within those precepts, by food, Pollan meant, and I mean, foods that are relatively unprocessed, processed or unprocessed, but not what we are now calling ultra-processed foods, which are a category of processed foods that are industrially produced, can't be made in home kitchens, you can't buy the ingredients in supermarkets, and these are foods with a lot of added calories from various sources. And there is now so much research, just a breathtaking amount of research that links consumption of ultra-processed foods to poor health outcome. The research pours in every day, and there's even one extraordinary controlled clinical trial done at the National Institutes of Health that showed that people who ate a diet that was largely ultra-processed foods, junk foods, in other words, ate more calories, 500 more calories a day than people who were eating other kinds of processed or unprocessed foods and didn't realize it. They were completely unaware that they were taking in so many more calories, and it was no surprise that they gained weight under those circumstances. So this evidence is so strong that it makes dietary advice much simpler these days. If you're going to make one change in your diet, it's to cut out ultra-processed foods. Foods like soft drinks, sugar-sweetened beverages, snack foods. It doesn't mean you cut them out completely, but because I'm never in favor of cutting something out completely, but you minimize it in your diet and focus more on whole foods, plant foods, not too much.
So that's an amazingly short mantra from Michael Pollan. Can you repeat it again?
Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. He's a brilliant writer.
Not too much and mostly plants. Eat food, not too much and mostly plants. I will never forget that. Rajnish, you've been looking at Marion's books and you held one. Ask Marion something that you find very intriguing there, and that will help us all.
Sure. I already briefly emailed Marion. Something that I found that was very happy to see was her explanation about alternative meat products or plant-based meat products. So maybe
love to know Marion's opinion on that, because wherever we go, we are seeing Beyond Meat, and it's becoming another huge industry.
Yes, I have food rules that I follow to the extent possible, and I follow Michael Pollan's rules: eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I find it very easy to eat that way and eat very deliciously that way. And one of my rules is never eat anything artificial. And plant-based meats go into the category of artificial, and they also fit into the category of ultra-processed foods because they're made with ingredients that you don't have in your home kitchen and that you can't buy at your local supermarket. With that said, they may have environmental implications that are very helpful. We know that eating a lot of meat, especially beef, it contributes to greenhouse gas emissions more than any other kind of food. And so they may have environmental benefits, but I wish they would get the ultra processed part out of that. Right now, they are the leading edge of American food capitalism in that they're backed up by vast amounts of venture capital. And there's an enormous amount of money riding on them. Whether they're healthier for people, I leave that to Christopher Gardner, who I know that you've already interviewed. He's done a study that says that they look like they're going to be healthier. But I don't understand the point. I don't see anything wrong with eating a plant-based diet. I don't feel the need to eat a lot of meat. And I don't really understand the whole business about meat substitutes very well, except that I've had two explanations that I guess make sense. One is that this is a gateway for meat eaters, heavy meat eaters, to try to transition into a more plant-based diet, okay. And then the other one was something that a parent told me, which was that she was so glad now that she could take her children to fast food restaurants now that they had artificial meats that her kids could eat. I thought, oh dear.
Okay. You know, I'm reading a lot about what is called precision fermentation to create new proteins and new food products. What do you think of that?
Well, I think we have all the foods that we need. We really have all the foods that we need for health. These are foods that we've evolved to eat. So I'm probably less interested in the new technological approaches than some other people are. I'm not. I'm too old to be interested in technology. You know, it's post what I know how to do. I think we have plenty of foods that are edible. The real problems are social. How do we get healthy food to people who don't have enough money to buy them? How do we get people to eat healthier diets when they are being bombarded with advertisements for unhealthy foods? How do we change the American diet to something healthier when the profits are in the unhealthy foods? Those to me are the interesting questions. But I know that lots of people are interested in food technology, and I do try to keep up with it, but it's an effort.
So, you know, every year, the bestsellers on the New York Times list are all books about food, nutrition, weight loss, Mediterranean diet, on and on. What is your view on some of these diets, like the Mediterranean diet? You know, I looked at it a while ago, and everything that I read said it's anti-inflammatory and things like that because of the olive oil and all the other plant-based ingredients and organic farming, the original Mediterranean diet. Is there any particular region of the world that has the best diet?
Well, the Mediterranean diet is always used as the standard because it meets Michael Pollan's criteria. It's food and it's mostly plants. The eat too much part of it is something you have to work out. But historically, the diets associated with the greatest longevity were the traditional Japanese diet, which was largely rice-based, but also mostly plants, real food, mostly plants, and the Mediterranean diet, which had a much higher fat content because of the olive oil used in it, but was still foods and plants. Any diet that doesn't have a lot of heavily processed foods in it is likely to be healthy. And that's why I say I think it's really easy to eat according to those principles, because there are delicious cuisines from all over the world that meet those principles. They're easy to cook. I happen to like vegetables, which makes it very easy, which makes it much easier. If you grew up not liking vegetables, I can understand that it would be a transition and you would have to do some work to begin to like them, but I like them.
Rajnish, any other question you have that is, interesting to you? The last question was brilliant from the book. I don't have the book, unfortunately. Can you show the book again for our audience, if it's your hand?
Yes. So the book is Let's Ask Marion, and I have several questions. I don't know how many we can really get through, but the next one I can ask, and actually this was a very interesting part of the book for me, and this was dealing with the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and the Healthy People Goals. And I know UN has been involved, and there's been all these 17 goals that have been written. And I really liked how you approached it. And we don't have to get into all the 17 goals, but the challenge is how do we implement them? What can we all do? Because the goals are wonderful and they can really, they'll be well thought out, but how can we make them effective?
The Sustainable Development Goals were goals for sustainable development, obviously, that were developed by United Nations agencies over a period of nearly 15 years. And they deal with every aspect of development. Some of them bear on food and nutrition. Probably the most prominent one that everybody knows about is zero hunger. The idea is that these are goals that are to be met by the year 2030. But here we are, we're already at 2021. And if anything, the prevalence of hunger in the world has gone up. It's going in the wrong direction. And what interested me about the Sustainable Development Goals was they reminded me very, very much of the Healthy People Goals that come out of the Department of Health and Human Services and are 40 years old now. Every 10 years, there are a new set of goals. And these goals are useful because they set standards for what you think ought to happen, and they allow you to measure whether it's happening or not. But built into the goals right from the beginning is no real accountability for who is responsible for carrying them out. And I think that's a huge flaw, because if you don't have somebody who's accountable for carrying them out, then it's left up to the public sector, it's left up to private non-governmental organizations, it's not organized. I mean, you're kind of taking it all on faith. And I think the zero hunger goal is the most obvious one, because we have such good data on how the pandemic has made hunger worse, not only throughout the world, but even in America. Certainly until the Biden administration came in and started to try to address that issue with payments to families and improving the supplemental nutrition assistance program. So we have these very aspirational worldwide goals and that everybody ought to be working on. I wanted to write about the Sustainable Development Goals because in my experience teaching, students don't know about them. There's very little discussion of them in the United States, but when I was traveling internationally pre-pandemic, there was lots and lots of discussions of them.
Marion, given the politics around food, and what Rajnish just asked you about the practicality of bringing more social and economic justice, I see right now a link between what we eat, peace consciousness, less violence, sustainable biology, sustainable planet, but also health and joy, as you said earlier. And food can be a very important aspect in this dream that we could have to create a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. given the politics and all the special interest groups across the world, particularly, as you said, you know, the food lobby, there are lobbies for everything in Washington, you know, the weapons lobby, the food lobby, the pharmaceutical lobby. Do you see any hope in the long term for actually a food revolution that would bring about social and economic justice and sustainability and health and joy?
Well, my hope is I'm hopeful all the time. I teach students. You know, I'm privileged to be able to teach young people I teach in a department that has programs in food studies at NYU. And so the students who come into that program are students who are interested in food, and they are overtly interested in food as a means to improve society. Not just health, but society in general. They want a food system that will promote human health, that will promote animal health, that will promote planetary health. They're very clear about that. And what they want us to teach them is to give them the tools to be able to go out and advocate and work for the kind of world that they want, using food as a mechanism to achieve that world. So how could I not be hopeful when these are the people that I'm dealing with on a daily basis? And I think we're in the middle of a food revolution in this country. We're already in the middle of one. And for young people, it's very difficult for them to see how the food system has changed over the last 20 or 30 or 40 years. One of the advantages of being ancient is that you've seen the changes that have taken place. I mean, and some of them are very simple. Food in supermarkets is much better now than it was 20 or 30 years ago. You can get fresh fruits and vegetables year round in a way that you never could 20 or 30 years ago. There's more organic food, far more organic food. There are more community supported agriculture systems where people are supporting farmers, paying farmers in advance to get foods. There are more people studying about food. There are more books about food. There's more public interest in it in every possible way. Food has become a much more important implement of social change. And I think students get that. Their elders don't always get it, but students get it right away.
That's very encouraging, because as we expand this conversation through education, through the younger generation, even if nothing dramatic happens in my lifetime, I think there's hope for future generations, and this food revolution now cannot be stopped. Would you agree?
No, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, I see it all the time, and this generation of students is very, very different than any generation I've experienced before in their deep concern for social issues and in their intuitive understanding that late stage capitalism is not good for the health of people or the planet. They just understand that. I never used to be able to talk about capitalism to students because it made them uncomfortable, and it was too scary and too radical. Everybody talks about capitalism now. Everybody gets it. I mean, they all understand that systems that are designed for profit and not for public health and not for social gain are not good for the health of people or the planet. Or animals, or anybody involved in the food system. And they understand that. And so then the big question becomes, how do you create a food system that is healthier in every aspect of the term health? Not only physical, but mental, emotional, social, planetary, environmental, all of those. How do you do that? And that's the kind of thing that they're interested in working on. And I applaud them all the way.
This has been an amazing conversation. Rajnish, do you have any last minute questions or comments? Because I want to make one after yours.
Okay, thank you, Deepak. I would just like to add, I think, we all discuss all the problems, and it's very hard to think through and provide solutions. And I really liked how the book, towards the end, discusses the main things that can happen, that can solve these problems. And I completely agree. And it requires, first of all, more organization of the non-government organizations and the efforts that are a little bit fragmented. Secondly, I think food advocacy, that Marion, you speak about, and community organizations, just organizing communities in a way. I like a caveat emptor. The buyer is ultimately the responsible. So maybe you can speak a little bit about that. How we can influence what actually comes to us or what choices we may have.
Well, the way I put it is you have to vote with your fork, but you also have to vote with your vote. And every time you make a food choice in a supermarket or at a farmer's market or any place where you buy food, you're essentially voting for the kind of food system that you want. If you buy organic food, that's going to support organic farmers and strengthen the whole movement towards a healthier way of growing food, a more regenerative form of agriculture that will be better for the planet and better for health. But at the same time, I think it's critically important to vote with your vote. And by that, I mean getting involved in the political system. I mean, if I had one wish for the food movement, it would be for the thousands of groups in the United States that are working on these issues to come together around common concerns and become a real political force with some muscle behind it. And until these groups are organized and into coalitions, I just don't see how that can happen. So I'm all for organizing, and there are libraries full of books about how organizing ought to be done. And it involves a lot of going into communities and working with communities. And we have examples of very successful food advocacy, particularly around soda taxes in the United States, where soda taxes, people actually voted for soda taxes because the community organizing made it so clear that not drinking sugar-sweetened beverages would just be so much better for everybody's health. So I'm really hopeful that this can be done. And I teach courses in advocacy. It's what I want students to be doing.
So my last comment is, and I hope you don't mind sharing with the world what I'm about to say. I was looking you up, and you're 84, I'm 74, and I think you are the perfect example of what you're advocating. You look wonderful, and I want to share your insights with the world.